And what Five Voices is we call it a framework. Giant created it under the founders, Steve Cochran and Jeremy Kubicek. And what they said was that everyone can categorize their personalities in five different spectrums. We have all five of them. It's just some of them are more natural than the other ones. And if you could kind of see yourself through these lenses, then it helps you to discern what type of patterns of behavior you're using, which ones you're choosing to use that are more natural to you, and then some of them you might be using that's a little not as natural, and so you might not feel comfortable with it.
All right, so I haven't done my homework as I should,
Okay.
but I have some homework because I've been under your wing on
Yeah.
everything. But first thing I want to know, or would like you to do, would be to just introduce yourself a little bit. Let us know a little bit about you and where you're currently at, what your plans are. Just a brief synopsis, I guess.
hmm Yeah, my name is Jim Lee. I am a Giant consultant. We work with clients pretty much all over the country, and actually we got started going internationally under the brand of Bespoke. And what we all do is in our companies, we really look to help people to get to know themselves better and start making more informed decisions on how they conduct themselves and how they lead themselves based on what they want to create for their own future. And my goal has always been to allow people to unleash their full potential by making decisions on how they want to make their actions and getting to know people around them and seeing them through some different lenses.
So yeah, you and I came into contact through a friend of a friend, and
Yes.
it's been transformative to say the least. So today, what I wanted to focus on was going to be the five voices, because I find, and when talking to people, that's kind of the first step that, or the first thing I have to explain when I
hmm
explain what's going on
hmm
with that. So that's what I just wanted to focus on today, was the five voices, and talk a little bit about each voice, what
hmm
that means, and how it's, well, I can talk about how I've used it to completely change the way I interact and deal with people.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
you had me take a test, right?
Yeah.
I took a test. It's
hmm
I forget if there's a specific title of it, but it was to find out what voice I am. And correct
hmm
me if I'm wrong, but basically there's five voices, and everybody primarily leads with their first two. Is that correct?
Pretty much, yeah. Sometimes, depending on how comfortable they are, they might just lead with their first one. But typically, I find most people use their first and second one. And what Five Voices is we call it a framework. Giant created it under the founders, Steve Cochran and Jeremy Kubicek. And what they said was that everyone can categorize their personalities in five different spectrums. We have all five of them. It's just some of them are more natural than the other ones. And if you could kind of see yourself through these lenses, then it helps you to discern what type of patterns of behavior you're using, which ones you're choosing to use that are more natural to you, and then some of them you might be using that's a little not as natural, and so you might not feel comfortable with it. One analogy I say is if you're right-handed, it's almost like your first two voices are like using your right hand. Your bottom two are probably like using your left hand, and the middle one can kind of go both ways. So
Mm.
there are some things that I just prefer to use my right hand on. It might be either it's writing. I predominantly use my right hand on. When I'm using my phone, I tend to use my right thumb. When I'm eating, I tend to use my right hand with a fork. But it doesn't mean that I don't use my left hand for certain activities. So I definitely use my left hand a lot when I tend to drive. I actually will use my left hand more than my right hand because my right hand tends to like to hang on the armrest, either on the gear shifter because I used to drive stick shift, or it's just readily available. Um, I use my left hand More often than not, when I'm out there in the water with my daughter and I'm playing around, because my daughter's on my right hand, but it doesn't mean I can't use my left hand.
Gotcha.
So these are just analogies to say, hey, we can use both hands, and there's some things that we're probably just ambidextrous on as well. But there's a preference for certain things. And then when you realize your personality has these five different spectrums and you can analyze what they are, then it really helps you to be able to discern and make some decisions based upon your preferences. And then realize that there are some things that you don't like to do and you don't understand why, but other people enjoy doing those things in a different way. And that's what the five voices spectrum helps you to see.
Right. The goal here ultimately is to be able to understand on a very basic level, see if
Hmm.
people are interested, they want to go, for maybe another video that goes a little deeper. But
Hmm.
yeah, for me, first was defining myself and understanding myself, because I just thought, the way I acted and the way I interacted with people was, it just didn't feel right.
Hmm.
I mean, it was obviously natural to me. It was my
Hmm.
tendency to do this, but it didn't feel right because I didn't think it was effective, or as effective as it could be, and I was struggling. So
Yeah.
first, you were able to define me,
Yep.
define others, and then I tell people you gave me the tools
Hmm.
and are still giving me the tools to practice and interact
Hmm.
with the other individuals. But I
Yeah.
mean, oh my gosh, it's been amazing. I can't thank you enough. I mean, I feel it right now. Like it's changed everything. So, for somebody sitting out there that doesn't even begin to understand, right?
Hmm.
You talked about kind of what it's like to use the voices, but so what's the first voice? And let's go in order of percentages.
Sure. Um, I'll go ahead and bring up a screen that we could both take a look at here.
Perfect.
And we have five voices. We have the nurturer, the creative, the guardian, the connector, and pioneer. Remember, we have all five of them. It's just that certain people tend to have
I think you're sharing
them
me.
in a certain order. Yeah.
As much as I like to look at myself.
Let's,
All right. I got it up. Got it on screen. Go for it.
all right. So we have all five voices in us. And if you look at the percentages, you can see how the quietest voice, the one on the left, the little sound meter,
Mm-hmm.
the nurture has the most amount of people by 43% of the population. And then if you go all the way to the right, which is the pioneer, this is the loudest voice, and that's you, John, right? That's your strength, is only 7%. And what this kind of shows us is that the dynamics of human interaction tend to be that the quietest people occupy the most, and then the loudest people occupy the least. And I'll kind of go through these a little bit in more detail, but there's just amazing things to just realize for you, John, right? When you realize, hey, you're only 7% of the population. So maybe your frustration of why people don't think and see things the same way as you was probably a lot more clear just on that fact itself, right?
Absolutely. Because I realized because I always grew up thinking everybody thought like me, as probably most people do. And I don't mean it so semantically as that, but
Hmm.
generally, right? People want to do better. People want to improve. People want to make the best out of things. They want to make something easier to do, on and on and on. And that
Hmm.
was just an assumption that wasn't right. I mean, these things I'm actually instilling in my girls,
Hmm.
what you're teaching,
Hmm.
to see and view people differently. I've already started that.
Yeah. And for me, having a 2.5-year old, I can tell which are her voices in what order they present,
Mm-hmm.
and it allows me to lean into her when she needs me to, but when she has the capacity to handle a little bit more of her, let's say I call it left hand skills because she's right-handed,
Right.
her more bottom two voices, then I tap on that a little bit because I want her to exercise it. I don't want it to be where she's only using her strengths and she's uncomfortable using some of those weaknesses. So let's I'll go through these a little bit in an overview from left to right.
Okay.
And the sound decibel meter doesn't necessarily mean it's how loud their voice volume is in voice in that term, but we say your voice in terms of one of those five voices. So
It
for
would
the
almost be your
nurture,
impact on those around you, possibly.
yeah, it's like how
Because
much
I'm the
they will
bazooka,
force.
right?
Yeah,
You
yours is the
taught me.
bazooka, and we call the nurturers their pea shooter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what it means is like how much they impose their thoughts and opinions onto other people. And so the nurturers, they are the lowest, the quietest one. what that means is, again, like if you have a differing opinion with a nurture, they will never like speak up again. They don't want to create any tension. And so we call them the champion of people, relational harmony, and values. And what it is their brain wiring is wired in a way that they have heightened sensitivity to people's emotions. And they're very present with how people feel. And because of that, they don't want to create any risk or tension in those relationships, so that is their strength. They're very good at helping people to create teamwork. They're very good at helping you to sense, hey, John, like, those are some things that could be insensitive. And they can see this. It might be hard for them to sometimes explain because it's so natural for them, but that's their strength. And they're
Right.
43% of the people. They are the peacekeepers of the earth, so to speak,
Yeah, we definitely need those.
especially nowadays, right?
Mm-hmm.
Next, we call these the creative. We have a little telescope on there, and it just tells you that they kind of see way farther into the future than most of us do, because creatives are introverted, and they're the kind of people that like to think out of the box. They're always thinking like, hey, what if we did this next? What if we did that next? What if we did something else? And they're always trying to help our community or our place to become a better society, either as what we call three creative thinkers. These are the analytical creatives. They're the ones that are always trying to solve people's problems and to make the world a better place down the future, or we call creative feelers. These are people that want to help maybe organizational or individual problems by thinking out of the box and figuring out ways to help others. Now, they are pretty quiet. They're 9% of the population, and their voice volume is really low. And one of the things about creatives is if you meet them is they always feel like they've got a lot of stuff going on in their brain and their mouth is too small of a funnel for it to all come through.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that you can do with creatives is, because they're always thinking about the future, is ask them questions about the future. And pretty much they're pretty good at thinking of all the contingencies of what could go wrong, and they like that. And so just run things by them. You might not see it, you might not be able to understand what they're saying, but again, they are looking way down the road in the future. And you've had a few creatives in your office as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I forget. Am I? This is bad, but I'm definitely pioneer. And then was it creative next?
Creative third.
Third.
Um, but the reason why you tend to use creative more is it's an introverted voice. And again, we have all five, and you spend a lot of time alone, John, right? Like you're
Mm-hmm.
driving places, you're working really hard, you're in your office, and usually for you, that's when it's activated. For me, when I'm driving, my creative voice goes like really haywire
Mm.
all the time, like always thinking of different things. I should do this, I should do that. Oh, if I did this, then I could get this. Like the
Right. That's why
brainstorming
I'll
just
come
doesn't
in
turn off.
after a weekend of just thinking and have all these new ideas and stuff.
Yeah,
But I think
yeah,
of creative, just to clarify, I think of creative as where you're going to be creative painting or creative sculpting or whatever, making movies or something like that, right? But
mhm,
creative to me, and now you can tell me, is also to me it could be creating a new standard operating procedure. It could be
yep,
creating a new way of doing things within the company. Is that fair to say?
yeah, absolutely. Anytime that they're trying to do something differently,
Okay.
right? They're the opposite of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. They're the ones that are like, hey, I think we can make this better. I think there's some room for improvement. Let's try it differently.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then
And so
Guardian.
yeah, so the Guardian's the
Just kidding.
opposite of that,
Yeah.
right? These are the people that are going to be the ones like, hey, no, there's a reason why things are done a certain way. They're the ones that are very good at protecting systems and processes because they hate risk. They want right now to operate the way predictably because they want the outcome to be something that they can calculate for, right?
Right.
So it's almost like for nurturers, they're the ones that do that for people. Guardians are that for processes, and their voice volume is right there in the middle. We say because guardians are the type of people, they don't tell you if you did a good job because they expect that to happen, but they're pretty good at telling you if you did a bad job because they want to minimize risk. They care for how processes, maybe projects can go wrong, and they're really good at helping to make sure that things are going well. So you would want to appreciate those engineers that are like, no, this is an SOP that we created. This is a standard operating procedure. If you're going to make some deviations into it, then before we run that systematically company wide, let's reel it back a little bit and make sure that we test it out, make sure it works for something that's less risky, and then incrementally create standard operating procedures to fold this in.
Well, right. I liken it to if you were building a bridge, the guardian's going to be the person that's designing the bridge, the architect, and you want that person to make sure everything is specced out and safe and load bearing, so it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't collapse.
Yep, absolutely. And then next we have the connectors. These are the people that are always out there. They're extroverts. They're reaching for relationships. They always have an idea. They're thinking down ahead. It's like, hey, if I could help somebody else, then I think this might be something that they would want to do. They tend to be salespeople in a way because they're kind of pitching ideas because they always want to help you, though, right? It's always for your good, not their own benefit. And that's one of the things about connectors that could kind of get misunderstood is they always seem to be like suggesting things. Hey, you should try this product out. They're always on social media telling about like the latest and greatest amazing thing, and they're always trying to connect you with somebody else. They could be really annoying, and they seem like there's so many out there, but they're only 11% of the
Well, that's
population.
what brought you and me together is our mutual friend Don, right?
Yeah.
He connected you with me. He thought
Yep.
you may be of value. And ever since that first meeting, and you told me that about Don, I see that everywhere. And as soon as you started saying this, we were talking the other day and he's like pitching new ideas about this or that. It's great. Yeah.
Yeah, and so Don, he's a creative connector. His first voice is creative. He's introverted, but as soon as he like well forms that idea, he's going to share it, right? And that's
Yeah.
how you can see those two voices working out. Like the second voice is very strong with him, but it always comes out from his first
So
voice.
creating an environment that is safer for these types of people is going
Hmm.
to allow more of that person, I would assume, to come out, right? Because they know like it's safer to share the idea. They're not necessarily going to get ridiculed
Yeah, and I think
or
that's the
put
problem
down.
with all these voices is if they haven't grown up in a safe environment, these voices can go kind of awry. Like imagine, if you're left-handed your whole life, and I know a lot of parents do this, they keep putting the pencil in your right hand.
Yeah.
Imagine how much dexterity that person's lost and skill sets to be able to do something more naturally, but they have to fumble through it in their life. And that could create some emotional trauma as well, because they just don't feel like they're as competent as other people around them. And they're wondering what's wrong with them.
Right. So as leaders, that's something we should be doing is creating that environment. Now, in creating that environment, do you ever see the possibility of some of them that getting out of control or being too comfortable? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, and I think that's where like you have to really mind yourself, and get to know you. So like, the last voice, pioneer, that's what you are, right? You're
Mhm.
about strategy and using logic towards the future. So it's almost like you're a creative voice, but you use logic and you're trying to win something, right? Like you always have a set goal. Creatives don't necessarily have a set goal. They like to brainstorm, like, hey, let's try this out, let's try that out. Whereas pioneers like yourself, you're like, no, I've got a mountain that I want to climb. I'm going to put that flag on it, and here's the logical steps that I need to take. Now, when I first met you, you couldn't see why other people couldn't see the things that you were strategically
Right.
already calculating out because it's logic, right? One plus one makes two. Well, here are all those logical facts of all the steps that I need to take, and I don't understand why my employees or other people can see that. Um, because other people might use emotions to make those decisions. Other people are using other goals to make those decisions. Other people, like guardians, those are the type of people that might be like um, sweating the details so much, whereas you're like, hey, that detail is important, but right now it's not instrumental to like the goal that I'm trying to make in this type of a timeline, right?
Right.
And so when I let you unleash and let your primary voice go all over the place, right? And you're a pioneer first voice, second voice connector, you're constantly looking for other people, you're connecting with other people to help you with your goals. But what happens is if you're not sensitive to, let's say, your bottom two, which is nurture and guardian, is you're not going to care about how other people receive that message. And also at the same time, you're constantly trying to reinvent the wheel to get there faster. And people are just not being able to follow you because they're going to feel like you're all over the place. Right. So
Right.
the first thing we did, John, was for you. It's like, well, can you see yourself through these lenses and how you tend to push that? And then learn about the strengths of each one as well as the weakness of each one and the negativity that comes associated with it if you don't do things in light of how other people might see it. So
Well,
what
right.
we say is,
I'm going to
mhm,
back up for a second
yeah,
because one thing that was profound that you said was, John, you talk to think, and a lot of other people think to talk, right?
mhm, yeah,
So what that meant for me as I pondered on that was like, okay, on a surface level, I get it. I I just talk out loud. I'm a talker. That's what I do,
mhm,
right? Other people don't talk as much, obviously,
mhm,
and but but even given the understanding that they're thinking before they're talking, right, is understandable. So how that applies to me is when I would come in from a weekend all excited about stuff,
mhm,
this and that, and I'm that in pioneer mode, but I also want to connect with others. And I don't feel like I'm connecting because I'm like, hey, we're going to do this and that, and all these things are going to go on. And they're just staring at me almost,
mhm,
or throwing out questions, that are more protective, guardian type, right?
yeah,
And so I would view that, I would take it personally and view that as something where they didn't care.
yeah,
They were just trying to be obstinate.
yeah,
They weren't involved or didn't matter, or just whatever would run through my head.
uh-huh,
And now that I understand this, I slow down,
yep,
I listen, I wait, I engage more. It's not the John show, you
yep,
know.
yep,
I expected that rapid fire back. All right, let's go. What are we doing? Just start talking, and they just don't do anything. That was, yeah, and then I get upset.
mhm,
So that's what a huge thing. I mean,
mhm,
from in there in the room, the meeting room, to I don't care if I'm at the deli at the store,
mhm,
like
yeah,
just understanding the guy behind the counter, or understanding what's going on. It's been amazing.
yeah, and your clients probably appreciate it, right? So,
From our first
from
meeting,
uh-huh,
our very first meeting at Starbucks that time, where you just dumped like 4 hours we sat there for 4 hours and you just put it in me. You
uh-huh,
talked about the creative and how, oh, they like, whoever made that cup was probably never satisfied.
mhm,
The logo should be a little bigger, should be a little higher, maybe it's a little greener,
mhm,
whatever. They're never satisfied. I literally left you and was able to use that 15 minutes later with a client who I realized was a creative,
mhm,
and he was sitting there. I'm not sure about the design of the sign and this and that. And I was able to talk to him in a way that
mhm,
reassured him, to the point at the very end, because I'm like, it's going to look great. I understand your vision. So I'm trying to
mhm,
connect with him on his level, not
mhm,
just convince him of my thoughts.
mhm,
And then at the very end, I go, look, I think this is going to look so great. Would it be okay if I take a picture and put it on my website? And
yeah,
that was like, boom, that he's like, okay, he got it.
yeah,
He felt safe, I guess, in getting his point of view across to me, that I fully understood it and was going to run with it.
yeah, and especially for you, like, for me to finally connect with you where you felt like somebody actually understood you.
Oh yeah.
Imagine that's the case, right? For a creative, because you're both like 7 and 9%, very low percentages, right? Like he probably doesn't get that often. And for you, that comes off as a pioneer, which is very confident, secure, you're structured. And for a creative, that doesn't tend to have that because they're constantly all over the place with all these ideas. They're lower in voice volume and they're constantly insecure because they always can think things can be better.
Hmm.
Like, how amazing was that person to find a leader in you to pull that confidence out of him?
Yeah, and I have to say, you being my coach on all this, just you being understood, understanding myself obviously is a big deal, but being
Hmm.
stood. I think I've texted you before at times, but it's like
Yeah.
I just appreciate it so much, because when you are in a position of a leader, I don't need much accolades or many accolades,
Hmm.
but I think just being understood is huge. It's
Yeah.
very helpful and goes a long way. So I always appreciate that. Thank you.
And that's what everybody wants. Every one of these five voices just wants to be understood. The
Right.
nurturer just wants to feel emotionally safe, that their feelings are validated. The
Right. But the
creative,
problem is,
uh,
so do I,
yeah,
but, or people like myself, but we come off, maybe the bazooka will come up, but we come off as just like confident, cocky, whatever. But
hmm,
even in the process of trying to connect, it's because I'm trying to be understood. And but then the juxtaposition of that is having the person on the other end, like a nurturer, who sees that in me
hmm
as overbearing, let's say, and I
Yep.
see that as a weakness in them, so I might even attack more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And so, like,
being
just
able to
imagine,
understand that is everything for
right?
everybody.
Imagine an organization without a nurturer. What would that be like, John?
Yeah, it's probably suits my style a little more,
hmm
but I have someone in my office, our designer right now, who's more nurturing. Like I
Uh-huh.
get that, like they nurturing connector type, where it's like, hey, talks to everybody a little bit. How's
hmm
everybody doing? Stuff like that.
hmm
And it is nice. And I have to remember, oh, you know what? Let me get a cup of coffee and let me just
hmm
talk for 5 minutes and set
hmm
that up for the day.
hmm
And make sure we're good and connect. And then yeah, we're good to go. I
Yeah.
have another person, a project manager in my office, who is like, you can talk and whatever, but he's more business, down to business,
hmm
and he's more focused on what he's doing, and that's nice too, because it tells me sometimes I need to just leave him alone. So there's those two juxtapositions in the office, which is interesting because this is fairly new for me, so I'm still navigating. We probably need to have a chat about that.
Yeah. And it's again, it's most people when they act what's natural to them, we say you tend to act accidentally because you're not really putting a lot of thought of it because you're basically putting other people into your shoes, not
Hmm.
yourself into other people's shoes.
Right.
And so, but if I get to know the other person better, right? That's a common saying, like, hey, walk a mile in somebody else's shoes and you'll have a better way to phrase it. Well, the five voices actually kind of shortcuts that for you, right? Like, you can understand what people are trying to say and how people are saying it. If you could take a moment to understand what their voice is, then once you do that, you'll have an opportunity to be able to speak as if you've walked into their shoes because you understand what their core is.
Right. I think this explains, so I mean, my mind explodes in all these different directions because, you know, in this it's like I didn't do very well in high school at all. And
hmm
my guess is because of the way they teach, right? They kind of
hmm
only teach to a very few set of these personality types, or at least that's what they want because they
Yeah.
don't understand it. My brain goes off into then what does that mean and how does that apply for my own children? And then
hmm
also, you know, could this be used for better understanding? Should there be a plethora of teachers that kind of mix it? I mean, my mind is going with potential ideas and where this can help. But
hmm
I digress. So this is everything. It's I don't I don't say it's nothing and everything at the same time, but it kind of is. Meaning
hmm
this is huge, but it's also just kind of the baseboard or the springboard for a lot of other things. But I
Yeah.
think we all look at other people and are very reactionary depending who we are. And if, you always hear the cliche, more love, more understanding, more whatever with the human race,
Uh-huh.
which I get, but if you could truly understand, because I had this conversation the other day with the person cutting my hair. So
Mhm,
she's more agreeable and I'm less agreeable, right?
mhm,
She's more the nurturer,
mhm,
connector type. But I explained the five voices in the process of the haircut to her
mhm,
because we were talking some politics, and I
mhm,
explained how I view things coming from my perspective, and how she probably views things coming from her perspective. And by the end of
mhm.
it, she's like, "Wow, I never thought about it like that."
Yeah,
And I'm like, "It doesn't make it right or wrong, or it's nothing like that. It's just you can give a different um, perspective of what somebody else might be thinking and what maybe their intention is instead of what you think it is. Just as
yeah,
I would think somebody didn't care, the nurturer on the other end is going to look at me and think I don't care.
yep, absolutely.
So the goal is to
And
bridge
imagine
that.
how hard it is for someone to follow you if they feel like you're not listening to them, right? And you don't care for them.
Or yeah, concerned about them.
Yeah, and we call that the difference between whether it's compliance that they have to listen to you or engagement that they want to listen to you. And we
Right.
say that most people just tell people what they want to hear when they're under compliance. So the people that you're leading, John, will only go through the path of least resistance if telling you the truth is going to create tension.
Right. Well, that leads back to that safe environment. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a lot to do that. I have worked on it and I'm still working on it, but it's night and day. My stress levels have gone way down. There was a part of me that I thought, what if I lose this? What if I kind of lose my jerkness, or that would I lose my drive?
Yeah.
Because is that what fuels me? And then once I started getting the tools, it's like, okay, I don't have to be a jerk. I just need to be effective. I don't want to be a jerk. I didn't really kind of know any other way. And now with this information, it's like, okay, I can approach this person, talk to them. We're all adults here. We can figure stuff out. I can listen. I can understand. I can let them know that I care. And then we just build from there. And it's been pretty powerful. Yeah.
And the other beauty is now you're multiplying your workforce, because now they will do more of the work for you instead of you having to have done all the work for them, because now you know how to speak in a way that they can understand and listen. Most leaders
Asks.
come to me and they ask me to change their people, to fix them.
Okay.
But the best leaders are the ones that come to me and say, hey, help me to lead my people, fix me. And that's what you did, John. You came to me and said, hey, I need help. Can you help me? Can you fix me?
I was actually talking to someone yesterday about that, and we were talking business, and I'm like, well, I screwed it all up. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, I screwed everything up. It's my fault. I was a horrible leader. I didn't know how to hire. I didn't know how to lead the people I hired. It was horrible. And they're like, that's different. I'm like, what do you mean? And they were like, most people don't admit that. And I think in order to take on this, you got to set your ego aside, and you've got to be more concerned about doing what's right and improving the organization than just being right. And you said something, well, you said it many times to me. It's like, you can almost change anybody, so to speak, or get them on the same page. But do you have the bandwidth, right? So that's where I always had this balancing contest. It's like, is it me or is it the person or what have you? And where I'm at now, it's been both. I've hired better, so I've had the people surrounding me more competent, let's say. But then I've also taken the skill set and apply it to that, and that's been extremely powerful. Right? Because then I'm able to have kind of the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
But I always struggle with that. It's like, what do I do? Where should I be? How much time should I spend? Let alone I wasn't very good at that, and I'm still working on being better. So for me, I think that was a good balance.
Yeah, that's good. Everyone's got so much capacity that they can handle, and every business is at a different stage. But just it's progress, not perfection. If you're constantly working on yourself, you'll find that you'll get there.
Right. Okay. Well, anything else you can think of along these lines? I think
I think that's it. I want to encourage people just to take the first step. Some of it is just people don't realize they're doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And if you want a different result, you're going to have to start something different. And typically, it's going to start with you.
Right. So, can I put a link down below?
Yeah.
To your organization.
Yeah, it's www.bspokellc.com, bespokellc.com. And we created a platform for people to just try it. It's really cheap. It includes personalized coaching at $50 a month. And what we're trying to do is get other leaders like yourself to just gather together, sit on a table. Let's go through this. Let's learn this together. And we're so passionate about this that we're trying to make this really affordable. It's low risk, and in a way that helps each individual to hear themselves. And from it, we want you to then learn about yourself so that we can help you to lead your team.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me.
All right, buddy. Bye.
you.